Good evening, Honorable Council members and ladies and gentlemen of the public. I am here today as a mother who can no longer disagree in silence with the inappropriate materials being distributed by our local libraries. Repeated recommendations have been made by councils that any concerns regarding sexually explicit materials being made available to minors must be addressed at the SCRL board level. Requests were made to speak at the October 2022 board meeting. The response from the director was, quote, "There is no regular board meeting in October." In January, however, when the meeting minutes were finally made public, records showed that this issue was, in fact, on the October agenda. Another request was made to present as a delegation in November. This request was denied. Repeated requests to present have been made by several different delegations since February 14th, 2023, in regards to the citizen petition, which you are aware garnered 1,796 physical signatures. These requests were neither denied nor accepted, resulting by default in denying citizens the right to engage in discussions around policy with the SCRL board. More recently, a public member requested to present as a delegation regarding policy, transparency, and accountability. And even though the SCRL board's policy states that proposals regarding library policies and regulations may originate from a resident of community, and that action on such proposals, whatever their source, will be taken by the board, his request to speak was expressly denied. So, despite a large number of citizens of the region expressing their disapproval of illicit materials being made available to minors, and despite a number of residents requesting to speak to this issue, and despite the statement made to Pembina Valley Online on March 30th by the South Central Regional Library Board Chair, quote, "Open dialogue is always welcome at the SCRL. No delegation has been permitted to speak since last September. In fact, since March of this year, the board has created and implemented policies to limit the voice of the public. They went so far as to break their own policies at the March 22nd meeting, when the SCRL board had both passed and immediately implemented policy in regards to delegations. All council members here today and in the South Central Regional Library region have received PDF copies of the citizen petition. You will remember that the request made to the SCRL board was to create a policy regarding sexually explicit materials being made available to minors, a policy that would parallel the Criminal Code of Canada. These are the laws that all Canadians, all government agencies, and all institutions operating in Canada reside under. Allow me to read a support document linked through the Manitoba Libraries Association's Intellectual Freedom and Anti-Censorship Toolkit. It reads as follows, quote, "Some limitations on the free flow of information and ideas might include restrictions on the circulation of or access to criminal content such as child pornography or incitements to terrorist activity. Even the Manitoba Library Association admits that expression of knowledge and freedom of speech reside under the Criminal Code. In the same way that books that contain terrorist ideologies cannot be made available through libraries, materials that contain child pornography cannot be permitted in libraries because all policies and the materials under said policies must be curated within the limits of the Criminal Code of Canada. And the South Central Regional Library Board, other than referring to their existing collection development policy, did not respond to the public's request. You have all seen and read samples of the sexually explicit content being made available to minors through our local libraries. So today, on behalf of the hundreds of businesses in the South Central Regional Library region who signed the petition sent to you, you are asked to stop funding materials that put our children at risk. This petition is a response to the South Central Regional Library Board's refusal to create policy that aligns with the Criminal Code of Canada. It is a response to the board's continued refusal to engage in dialogue with the public. It is a response to the safety concerns of your community. If it is not possible to remove the funding specifically for these sexually explicit materials being made available to minors, you are asked to temporarily seize all funding to the South Central Regional Library until policies can be put in place to reflect Sections 152 and 163 of the Criminal Code of Canada. If you are under a legal obligation to fund the libraries, then today I ask you to investigate your contract with the South Central Regional Library. I would also advise that you consider Section 5.01 of the SCRL's policy development, which reads as follows: the board, accountable to its member municipal councils and through them, to the people of the South Central Regional Library, is the body which determines all questions of general policy to be employed in the conduct of the library. This board is accountable to you, its member municipal councils. It is through you that the South Central Regional Library Board is accountable to the public. We stand here at a pivotal moment in time. This is ground zero of a culture war, and the target is our children. Ask yourselves, why has the South Central Library Board silenced public voice? Why have Manitoba's major news media outlets censored the Criminal Code of Canada from their articles? Why are the cries for decorum in council chambers louder than the cries for decorum for our children? Where is the research that demonstrates that these materials are in fact safe for kids to consume? We are witnessing the removal of age appropriateness and a heightened, frenzied movement to promote the sexual freedoms of children. And what if the goal is the sexualization of our children? To concede that a child is a sexual being from birth, that a child can make informed decisions about their own sexuality without the protection of parents. What then happens to the age of consent? It dissolves. Just like every cultural revolution of the past, our children are on the front lines. And maybe in the past, people could say that they didn't see it coming, but we cannot. You have seen the materials, and you will not be able to say, we didn't know. How many of you would tell me in secret, I agree with you, but I cannot say anything? Yes, the pressure to conform is immense, but I implore you to uphold your ethical responsibility and speak your mind. It is time to tear up these invisible contracts and stand in front of the children, because if we do not, by default, you have placed these little ones on the front lines of this cultural battlefield. I believe that you are put into these positions for a time such as this, and that regardless of one lawyer's opinion, to whom I would ask what grounds they have to deny the Criminal Code's authority on this issue, you know pornography when you see it. If these materials cannot be read in chambers to adults, then you cannot read them to our kindergartners. If these pictures cannot be posted on national news media comment sections because they violate community standards, then you cannot show them to our 10-year-olds. You, the elected officials, are entrusted with the safety of its citizens. 1,796 people are questioning the safety of their children within an institution that you have helped to create. Hundreds of businesses have signed, requesting that their tax dollars not fund material that put the children in the crosshairs of a highly sexualized agenda. Safety is under your jurisdiction under the Municipal Act. You have been given the authority to create bylaws. Create a bylaw that reflects Sections 162 and 163 of the Criminal Code of Canada so that no child in this community is exposed to materials that put them at risk. For those elected into positions of authority and tasked with the safety of this community, this should not be an unreasonable request. I will now refer to the petition signed by hundreds of businesses in the South Central Regional Library, which reads as follows. Whereas the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 163, defines child pornography as a visual representation that shows a person who is under the age of 18 years and who is depicted as engaged in explicit sexual activity, or where the dominant characteristic is the depiction of a sexual organ or the anal region of a person under the age of 18 years. And whereas Section 163 of the Criminal Code of Canada also defines child pornography as any written material whose dominant characteristic is the description of sexual activity with a person under the age of 18 years or the written depiction of underage individuals engaged in explicit sexual behavior. And whereas Section 152 of the Criminal Code of Canada states that every person who for a sexual purpose invites, counsels, or incites a person under the age of 16 years to touch, directly or indirectly, with a part of the body or with an object, the body of any person, including the body of the person who so invites, counsels, or incites, and the body of the person under the age of 16 years, is guilty of an indictable offense. And whereas the South Central Regional Libraries have children and youth fiction and nonfiction materials that fit the above descriptions of child pornography, and instruction to sexual touching of persons under the age of 16 years, both on their shelves and in their online selection. And whereas the SCRL board has been made aware of the content of several books, both fiction and nonfiction, and has chosen to keep said books on the shelves and in their online selection of books. And whereas parents and guardians have authority over their children, they have the right and responsibility of custody, health and safety, education, providing food, caring for them, supervision, and psychological and physical protection. And whereas the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child, of which Canada is a signatory, states that governments and government entities, including libraries, shall respect the responsibilities, rights, and duties of parents to provide, in a manner consistent with the evolving capacities of the child, appropriate direction and guidance. And whereas Manitoba library policies which call upon expression of knowledge do not supersede the rights of a child, the rights of a parent, nor the Criminal Code of Canada. And whereas Manitoba libraries, including the South Central Regional Libraries, lack the protocol to ensure that parents can screen for any of the sexual content mentioned above. The lack of protocol contravenes parental human rights and is a violation of the Criminal Code of Canada to make them available. We, the undersigned, therefore, based on Canadian law and parental and guardian rights, request that our tax dollars be removed from all South Central Regional Libraries on the basis of the SCRL's continued criminal acts of distributing materials that contain pornography, visual representations, audio and written, and that instruct on the sexual touching of minors, all which contravene the Criminal Code of Canada. I would like to refer to the book Let's Talk About It. This comic book, not categorized in any way as educational and not award-winning, was written by comic book artists. The book begins with the following caveat, quote, "The authors and publisher expressly disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects that may result from the use or application of the information contained in this book. I would ask you to consider if the authors and publisher are not willing to take responsibility for the harm that may come from following the advice of this book. Is the SCRL board? Are you? Now I will read the section of the book that gives step-by-step instruction on masturbation. Quote, "Trail your fingers around and over your vulva. Flutter your fingers lightly from place to place. Tug, pull, and rub your labia. Circle your fingers around and over your clit. Give it a couple quick pats. Press and pull on the skin around your vulva to make it taut. Try slipping a finger or two inside your vagina. Later on, try adding a sex toy to your masturbation. They can bring a completely new sensation that you can't experience with just your hands." Given that Section 152 of the Criminal Code states, quote, "Every person who for a sexual purpose invites, counsels, or incites a person under the age of 16 years to touch, directly or indirectly, with a part of the body, or with an object, the body of any person, including the body of the person who so invites, counsels, or incites, and the body of the person under the age of 16 years, is guilty of an indictable offense. Have you, this counsel, checked with your legal counsel or a criminal lawyer? Remembering that this would simply be their legal opinion, nonetheless, have you asked any legal counsel how they negate that this material is in breach of the Criminal Code of Canada? I expect that every child in Canada has the same right of safety under the law and that no child should be excluded from this protection. And I would fiercely advocate that the children in our community be granted that same standard of safety. Thank you for your time.